They found him face down in the salt, eyes wide open, mouth full of dust. No wounds, no signs of struggle, just terror. The last thing he wrote was a single word: awake. But what could make a seasoned researcher collapse from fear? Without a mark on his body. Why did his compass spin wildly for 3 days before stopping, pointing straight down? And what lies beneath the flattest place on Earth? That was never meant to be uncovered. The plane touched down in Uyuni at dawn. From above, the Salar looked like a frozen sea, flat, cracked, endless. A mirror when wet, a blinding desert when dry. Elias stepped off the small charter jet with a heavy coat, a leather satchel, and a mind already racing. The documents had arrived just 2 nights ago. No return address, only a wax seal with a spiral carved into it, almost like a fingerprint that had been repeating itself. Inside the package, handwritten notes, diagrams, and a GPS coordinate scribbled in the margin, barely legible beneath. Fair water stain. The name on the last page sent a chill through Elias the moment he saw it. Dr. Guillermo Salvatierra, a Bolivian geophysicist. He'd been missing for over a year, presumed dead. And yet, this package had been mailed last week. Inside the satchel, Elias carried a copy of Salvatierra's final journal entry. The sentence had no context, no punctuation. Just one word, underlined 3 times in blue ink: awake. He met the guide near the edge of town, a wiry man in his 60s named Luis, skin weathered from sun and salt, eyes sharp as obsidian. "You're the cryptologist?" Luis asked without shaking hands. "Elias Ward," he replied, offering a nod. "You knew Salvatierra?" Luis didn't. "Answer." He turned to his truck, opened the door, and tossed Elias a pair of polarized goggles. "You'll need these," he said. "Sun here doesn't forgive curiosity." They drove in silence for hours. The salt flats swallowed the horizon, no trees, no shadows, only a brilliance that bordered on violence. Luis finally spoke as they neared the location marked in Salvatierra's notes. "He came here for weeks," Luis said. "Alone, sometimes he'd just sit and wait. No equipment, no digging, just listening." "Listening to what?" Elias asked. Luis hesitated, then tapped the dashboard. He said the desert had a heartbeat, and it only speaks to those who wait long enough. When they arrived, there was nothing. No structure, no debris, just the endless geometry of cracked salt underfoot. Elias stepped out and scanned the area. The GPS matched. This was it. But then, Luis pointed to something on the ground. Small stones arranged, in a tight spiral, almost invisible against the white crust. At the center, a flat metal plate barely the size of a book flush with the earth. Elias knelt beside it, brushing away salt with gloved fingers. The metal shimmered, even in the shade of his body. A symbol was etched into its center. A perfect circle split by 3 lines, like an ancient sundial missing its gnomon. He pulled out a portable scanner. No signal, no response, just dead static. Not even a reflection on infrared. It was as if the object was refusing to exist. Then came the hum, barely audible, more like a vibration in the chest than a sound. Elias looked up. Luis had stepped back several feet. "You feel that?" Elias asked. Luis nodded, eyes fixed on the horizon. "It happens before storms. The sound, like something beneath the salt, starts breathing." Elias sat down, cross-legged, removed his gloves, placed both hands on the metal. It was warm. He closed his eyes. For a moment, nothing. Then, an image flashed, unbidden, sharp, impossible. A map, not drawn on paper but in light, shifting, moving, and then gone. He gasped and pulled back. "What did you see?" Luis asked. Elias stood slowly. "A map," but not of this place. Not even of Earth. It felt older. Luis didn't reply. Instead, he walked toward the truck. You'll want to see where he stayed. He left something behind. Something I was told never to open. 15 minutes later, they were at an old metal container set up like a field lab. Dust covered everything. But on the table, there was a locked black box and a notebook next to it. Elias picked it up. On the first page, a single phrase, in Salvatierra's handwriting. If someone finds this, then it's already listening. Elias looked at the box. It had no keyhole, no latches, just a recessed panel with the same symbol as the one on the metal plate. Help me move it outside, Elias said. Luis hesitated. I wouldn't. I would, Elias replied, already lifting the box. As they stepped back into the salt, clouds were forming far in the distance. The air had changed, charged, heavy. Elias placed the box over the metal plate. Nothing happened. Then a single tone rang out, metallic, pure, unnatural. The symbol on the box began to glow, and so did the salt beneath their feet. The tone faded, but the vibration didn't. Elias could still feel it under his boots like a low resonance crawling through the salt, almost imperceptible, yet impossible to ignore. The box resting over the metal plate now pulsed with a faint amber glow, synchronized with something beneath them. Something buried. Something awake. Luis stood a few meters away, arms crossed, staring at the horizon like it might suddenly explain itself. That sound, Elias said quietly, it's not mechanicals, it's harmonic and it's tuned. Luis didn't respond right away. Then, almost like a confession, he muttered, it's not the first time I've heard it. Elias turned. When? 3 years ago, before the French team came, before Salvatierra, a pilot crash-landed near here during a storm, said he heard music in the ground before losing his instruments. He walked 4 days to the nearest outpost, never flew again. Elias stared back at the box. No visible switches, no writing, just that same symbol, now faintly illuminated. He pulled out his notebook and copied the design again, this time more carefully. The lines weren't just decorative, they were geometric, intentional, measured, some kind of code. The symmetry was perfect. Luis was silent, but Elias could tell he was watching. You ever wonder why salt preserves things? Elias asked. Luis raised an eyebrow. You mean like food? Not just food, wood, bones, even signals. In the right conditions, salt doesn't just dry, it locks in seals. It turns time into a vault. Luis exhaled slowly, then gestured back toward the truck. There's something else. I didn't want to show you before. Inside the vehicle, under a false compartment behind the seat, Luis pulled out a rolled-up piece of canvas. He unwrapped it on the hood. It was a photograph, old, black and white, taken from an aerial survey decades ago. The salt flat was clearly visible. But in the center of the image, right where they were standing now, something was off. A shadow, a near-perfect circle, faint but undeniable, darkening the crust of salt. Not a crater, not a lake, a depression like something immense had been pressed down from below, and then vanished. This is from 1962, Luis said. The shape never showed up again in later surveys. Elias stared at the photo. His mind spun through possibilities. Volcanic dome, sinkhole, collapsed structure. But none of them matched what he had just seen, and none explained the resonance. How deep do you think it goes? He asked. Luis shrugged. No one's dug far here, but salt crust's unstable. If something's under there, it's been there longer than any of us. Elias walked back toward the box. The glow had dimmed, but the panel now showed faint lines, thin grooves like veins in the metal. He ran his fingers across them. They were warm, not from heat, but from presence. He spoke out loud, not to Luis this time, but to the box. "You're not just a container, are you?" A flicker of light passed beneath his palm. He stepped back. Then slowly, almost reluctantly, a thin panel slid open on the side of the box. Inside, a sphere, floating, unsupported, humming. The surface was like dark glass, but not reflective. More like it absorbed light. Elias reached for it, but the hum grew sharper. Higher pitch. He stopped. "Don't," Luis said. "Whatever it is, it's listening." Elias narrowed his eyes. "No, it's waiting." He looked around. Flat horizon, no cover, no structures, no explanation. But his instincts were screaming that this machine, this artifact, wasn't alone. That maybe the desert wasn't empty, only quiet. And there's a difference. He sat down in the salt again, taking a deep breath. His fingers reached into his satchel, pulling out a worn, leather-bound notebook filled with cipher patterns from past discoveries. He flipped through until he found one that had been troubling him for months. Symbols recovered from a collapsed temple in northern Chile. Designs no one had been able to classify. Until now. He placed the open page next to the metal box. "Fuwe, symbols matched, not all but enough," Elias whispered. "You've been speaking longer than we've been listening." He looked at Luis. "We need to go back to where you found this, every scrap and every page, everything Salvatierra left behind. Because I think this machine isn't here to be found." Luis frowned. "Then why is it here?" Elias looked up toward the clouds, now thicker, turning dark. He could feel the static building in the air. "Because it's been calling. And someone, or something, buried it to keep it quiet." The storm hit faster than expected. Thick clouds swallowed the sky in less than 15 minutes, and with them came the first crackle of lightning far off in the distance. But Elias wasn't afraid of the weather. He was afraid of what it might awaken. They had moved the box back into the container and placed the sphere, still hovering, still humming, on the steel table where Salvatierra had once worked. The glow had shifted. It was no longer amber. Now it pulsed with a deep, cold blue, rhythmic, like a signal. Luis brought over a crate from the back corner, wrapped in layers of tarp and plastic. These were his last notes. Some were burned. Others, I think he tried to hide. Elias unwrapped the contents carefully. Dozens of pages, most handwritten, filled with sketches, numbers, incomplete equations. One diagram caught his attention immediately. A series of concentric rings, interconnected by lines of varying thickness. At the center, a small dot marked only with one word: origin. He leaned over the table, tracing the lines with his finger. This wasn't just a diagram. It was a system. Not mechanical, not astronomical, and something else. "What is this, he murmured. Luis stepped closer. He said the machine doesn't do anything. It just waits. He thought it was broken. But then he stopped writing about function, started writing about awareness. Elias flipped to another page. A sentence stood alone at the top. "It doesn't scan your body. It scans your choice." He felt a chill run through his spine. The sphere pulsed brighter. Then, as if responding to something unspoken, the sphere began to descend slowly into the table, revealing a narrow cavity beneath it. Within the cavity, a complex arrangement of coils, gears, and something else, liquid metal suspended mid-air, forming unstable geometric shapes that shifted as Elias moved around it. He couldn't look away. This was not ancient. It was foreign, but not in the extraterrestrial sense. Foreign in logic, in design, like it had been built not to function, but to respond. "It's interactive," Elias said, thinking aloud. "But not tactile, not digital. It's reactive to something deeper." Luis looked confused. "What does it do?" Elias stepped back and shook his head. "I think it reads us, our alignment, our intentions. Not in a mystical way, in a measurable, structured way. Like it's designed to detect a frequency in the mind or the soul." As if hearing the word frequency, the sphere shimmered, and the shifting liquid forms inside locked into place. A flash. On the far wall of the container, a projection appeared, hazy, unstable, but visible. Lines, maps. Not geographical, but neurological. Patterns similar to brain scans, but layered over what looked like constellations. Elias was stunned. He reached into his bag and pulled out photos from a dig site he had visited years before. Carvings found deep inside a pre-Incan temple. He placed one next to the projection. The match was undeniable. The same lines, the same shapes. "This is older than language," Elias whispered. "Older than us, but it's been repeating. Across cultures, civilizations, time." Luis stepped back. "You're saying this thing has been active before?" "I'm saying," Elias replied, still watching the projection morph and reshape, "that it may have never stopped, and we've been mimicking what it shows us like echoes." Then the projection shifted again, this time revealing what looked like a human figure in a seated position, surrounded by patterns of light. The figure pulsed once, then vanished. A single phrase replaced it, written in the same symbol. Language Elias had traced from the box. "You are nearing alignment." His breath caught in his throat. Luis leaned in. "What does that mean?" Elias didn't answer immediately. His thoughts raced. If this machine measured intention, if it read alignment or purity or clarity, then perhaps it was more than a recorder. It was a threshold, a gatekeeper. And if Salvatierra had activated it, perhaps he had crossed into something else. He looked down at the glowing sphere. "You said the pilot heard music." Luis nodded. "Like strings. Echoes inside the earth." He said it was beautiful, until it wasn't. Elias reached out slowly. His fingers hovered near the projection's source. The metal below was vibrating now, like a heartbeat shared by the entire desert. "You don't have to touch it," Luis said. But his voice was already distant, because Elias wasn't thinking about touching it. He was wondering why, after all these years decoding symbols, languages, histories, it felt like something was now trying to decode him. The projection disappeared as suddenly as it had appeared. The room dimmed again, and the only light now came from the pulsing sphere, still cradled in its open chamber, still vibrating in that strange rhythm. Too precise to be random, too human to be mechanical. Outside, thunder rolled low and wide, and for the first time since he arrived, Elias felt something he didn't expect. Not fear, recognition. Like he wasn't discovering something new, but remembering something forgotten. He sat on the metal floor, elbows on his knees, staring at the machine. The container creaked in the wind. Luis paced near the door, eyes scanning the horizon through the slats. "Storm's almost here," Luis muttered. "This place floods fast." But Elias wasn't moving. He was fixated on the phrase the machine had projected just minutes ago. "You are nearing alignment." It didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like a threshold. He leaned forward, speaking not to Luis, but to whatever intelligence might be listening. "What do you want to align me with?" Nothing responded, but the sphere pulsed once, slow, soft, as if acknowledging the question. Elias stood and grabbed his notebook again. He flipped back to the carvings from Chile, then to another set of notes taken in Turkey. The same symbols had appeared near the Göbekli Tepe site, ancient, undeciphered. And now they were here, responding. Not with answers, but with awareness. He spoke again. "You've been following us, or maybe we've been following you." Luis turned. "Are you talking to it now?" "I'm talking to whatever built it," Elias said, "and I don't think it was meant to be found." The machine vibrated once more. Then, without warning, the projection returned, this time not on the wall but floating in mid-air above the sphere. A three-dimensional shape, fluid, shifting, like an organic mandala that reconfigured with each blink. In its center, what looked like a human silhouette, sitting still, surrounded by orbiting points of light. Then came a low harmonic tone, not loud, not aggressive, but full, pure. It filled the container, vibrating the shelves, the walls, their bones. Luis stepped back. "What the hell is this?" Elias's voice was low. "It's tuning us." Luis stared. "What?" Elias pointed to the lights around the figure. "This isn't a message. It's not showing us something. It's showing us to ourselves, to it. It's mapping our resonance like a mirror. But not for the body, for the mind." The tone grew sharper, clearer, almost melodic. Then Elias felt it. A pull, not physical, not emotional, deeper, like something inside him was being brought to the surface, a memory maybe, or a state of thought. His hands trembled slightly. He sat down again, eyes closed. And then, quietly, he whispered, "It's not measuring intelligence, it's measuring intention." Luis was frozen now, torn between the door and the man sitting calmly in the middle of an ancient device, glowing in the middle of a storm. "We should go, Elias." But Elias stayed still, breathing slow, almost meditative. "You ever wonder," he said, "why certain minds across history seem centuries ahead of their time? Why certain ideas appear simultaneously in different parts of the world with no contact?" Luis didn't answer. Elias opened his eyes. They were moist, not from sadness, but from something else, something stirring. "What if we're not inventing new thoughts?" Elias said. "What if we're remembering old ones?" Outside, lightning flashed. This time it wasn't random. The moment the sky lit up, the sphere responded, its light flaring in sync with the bolt, and again with the next one, like the machine was syncing with the atmosphere. Or worse, orchestrating it. Luis opened the door just a crack and stared out. "Salt's starting to flood," he said. "We have 20 minutes before we're floating." But Elias was already pulling the cables from the crate, connecting them to the external battery he'd brought with him, rerouting power to the machine's base. He didn't know why. He just knew it was the next step. As soon as he connected the last wire, the projection changed again. The floating shape shifted to something new, topographic lines, not land, not sea, but consciousness. It looked like a brainwave. Then a constellation, then a spiral, and one phrase appeared again, pulsing slowly above the sphere. "The gate opens from within." Elias stepped back, whispering to himself, "It's not a destination, it's a state." Luis looked at him, eyes wide. What the hell does that mean? Elias looked at the door, then at the machine, then back to the pulsing shape. "It means we've been trying to find this place on a map," he said. "But maybe this whole time the map was trying to find someone ready to see it." The storm was at its peak. Lightning stitched across the sky in violent white arcs, thunder breaking seconds later like the cracking of a giant shell. The container rattled as sheets of rain began to strike the desert floor. But in the middle of it all, the sphere's glow was steady, calm, almost indifferent. It pulsed with the rhythm of a heart that didn't belong to flesh. Elias stood before it, soaked in sweat, not from the heat, but from the weight of what was unfolding. Luis hovered near the door, torn between the instinct to flee and the impossible need to witness. The projection above the sphere shifted again. This time, it wasn't abstract shapes or constellations. It was a map, a vast expanse of lines and points, interconnected like a web of roads. At first, Elias thought it was geographic, rivers, mountains, coastlines, but the more he stared, the more it felt wrong. The lines bent where geography shouldn't bend. The points moved. They pulsed like neurons in a brain. And then he realized. It wasn't land, it wasn't sea. It was consciousness, a living cartography of thought itself. The words followed. "The map is not of the earth." Luis muttered. "That's impossible." Elias shook his head slowly. "No, not impossible. Just unreadable until now." The lights rearranged again, forming a spiral that extended outward endlessly, like a path without borders. At its center, a small dot pulsed brighter than the rest. Elias whispered, "Origin." The same word Salvatierra had written, the same dot at the center of his sketches. He hadn't been mapping the ground. He had been trying to chart the mind. The machine hummed louder, and once more the phrase appeared, "The gate opens from within." Elias closed his eyes. For a moment, he felt it again, the pull, not physical, but internal, a vibration that resonated with his breath, his pulse, his memory. Images cascaded in fragments behind his eyes. Ruins he had walked through years ago, inscriptions he had copied, symbols he had struggled to decode. For the first time, they weren't fragments. They were echoes of the same source, different civilizations, same voice. He opened his eyes, voice low but steady. "This machine isn't unlocking a place, it's unlocking us." Luis shook his head, his voice tense. "Then shut it down, Elias, before it unlocks too much." But Elias couldn't. He stepped closer, hands trembling as he placed them near the sphere again, not touching, just present. The hum adjusted, matching his breathing. The projection sharpened, the spiral expanding. Outward, until new coordinates began to appear around the edges of the map, then vanishing before he could note them down. Luis pointed. "There. Did you see that?" Elias nodded. "Yes, but they're not stable. They're conditional." "Conditional on what?" Elias looked at him. "On me." The machine flared once, blinding for a second. When the light dimmed, a final phrase hovered in the air. "Alignment achieved." The hum stopped. So did the storm. Not faded. Stopped. Like the world had been put on pause. The rain froze mid-air outside the container, drops suspended like glass beads. Lightning curved but held, unmoving in the distance. The silence was unbearable. Elias whispered almost to himself, "This isn't natural time, it's observation. We're being held inside its perception." Luis's face was pale, his voice barely audible. "Then who's perceiving us?" The sphere shifted one final time. Its glow dimmed, then brightened, not in pulses now, but in deliberate flashes. 3 long, 3 short, 3 long. A signal, a message older than satellites. Morse code. Elias counted, breath short. The letters formed a single word, remember. And then everything collapsed back into motion. The rain fell, thunder cracked, lightning burned across the desert. The sphere dropped silent into the box, its glow extinguished. The projection vanished as if it had never existed. Elias staggered back, hands shaking, breath uneven. The machine was inert now, no different from a sealed artifact in a museum. But his notebook was different. He flipped it open and saw fresh markings across the page, written in his own handwriting, though he hadn't touched a pen. New coordinates, a map drawn not with ink but with intention. Luis looked at him, eyes wide. "What did it give you?" Elias stared at the coordinates, then closed the book gently. "Not a place," he said softly. "A direction." Luis frowned. "Direction to where?" Elias stepped out of the container. The storm was already moving east, the flats shining under faint moonlight now breaking through. He looked at the endless horizon and whispered, "Not where. When?" He stood there for a long moment, salt crunching under his boots, mind burning with the weight of the revelation. If the machine measured intention, then what it had shown him wasn't a map of Earth. It was a map of consciousness through time, a cartography of memory, and it had just chosen him to carry the next line. He exhaled, slow, steady, the desert wind cutting cold against his face. If Salvatierra wrote "awake" as his last word, Elias said to himself, then maybe he wasn't warning us, maybe he was welcoming us. Luis closed the container doors behind them, sealing the box again. "So, what do we do now?" Elias slid the notebook back into his satchel. His eyes were distant, thoughtful. "Now we follow, wherever it leads." He took one last look at the flat, endless expanse. The salt mirrored the sky, and for a fleeting second, he felt as if he were standing not on the earth, but inside the reflection of a greater map. A map no one had drawn, yet one that had been waiting for him all along. And if the world hides machines that don't measure time or distance, but the very choices we carry inside us, then maybe the greatest ruins aren't buried under the earth at all. Maybe they've been sleeping in us, waiting to be remembered. And if one machine was buried beneath the salt waiting for someone to listen, how many others might still be out there, hidden under oceans, mountains, or ruins we've walked past 1,000 times? Perhaps the next one is already humming, waiting for the right mind to hear it. If you followed me this far, then maybe you're already listening too. Until the next fight.